Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Nice to see everyone here this morning. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well. Today is what we call our group learning program, where I come together each Sunday with students, guiding you in a meditation session. And then afterwards, I'll share a talk with you about the teachings of the Buddha to be able to help you on this journey to enlightenment. Each Sunday, I go chapter by chapter in this book, helping students to be able to understand. And over a 7-month period, I gradually work my way through this entire book. Today, we're in chapter 18. Which is titled God's Creative Action. You have free will. This is where you can learn about this being of God, where you can actually get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being or without a relationship with this being. You getting to enlightenment isn't determined based on whether you have a relationship with this being. Oftentimes, people have been taught that the Buddha never taught about God, or some people will go as far as saying the Buddha denied the existence of God, or that he rejected God. And this isn't actually true. The Buddha taught about this being, but he didn't put this being at the center of his teachings, because it's not this being that determines whether or not you get to enlightenment. It's you that determines whether you get to enlightenment. So he put you at the center of his teachings. So oftentimes there's things that people have been taught that are incorrect or misunderstandings about this being of God. So I'm going to help you guys to be able to understand this in a way that you can independently verify what it is that I'm sharing, because none of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief. You're learning, examining, and investigating his teachings. You're reflecting on them to verify if they're true or false, and then you're practicing them, integrating them into your day-to-day life. So again, welcome to all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone who's joining online. This enlightened mental state is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't experience any discontent feelings. You will have eliminated all your anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of that can be eliminated through training of the mind. Oftentimes people think it's the outside world that's causing these feelings, but it's actually what's going on in your own mind. And this is the reason why you can eliminate them, because it's not the outside world that's causing these feelings within your own mind. So meditation is an important part of the journey and part of the training. So I'm going to start with meditation, but you would need much more than meditation to be able to get to enlightenment. So that's why after our meditation, I'll share a talk with you guys that'll help you in this journey. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way that I start is with some chanting in order to be able to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. If you would like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. There's chanting sheets over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself and chant along if you'd like. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he used chanting as a way to help his students to commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. So he used it as a learning tool or as a learning device. So you can see from the origins of chanting that this isn't a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that. This is a way today to help ease your mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was used as a learning tool or as a learning device. If you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of that, I don't think the Buddha even created these chants himself, because the Buddha wouldn't have walked around and said, here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me, right? This would be like ego and arrogance. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you wouldn't do that. You don't have an ego. You don't think of yourself as being above people or below people. But if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, and frustration, and all these other feelings to the peaceful and joyful mental state that's enlightenment, and this teacher didn't want anything or expect anything from you, you'd probably have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's why I think these chants actually came from his students, either during his life or after his death. So you're welcome to chant along, and it'll actually help you in your meditation. Once we're in the meditation, I'm going to be providing you some guidance where I'll essentially be teaching you and instructing you how to meditate while we're actually meditating. But then there's going to be a period of time of quietness where we're all meditating. Everyone here at the temple and anybody joining us online will just all be meditating at the same time. During this period of time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds. You might hear a car go by, a dog barking, a bird chirping. Someone here could cough or sneeze. This is all normal. If you're in meditation with a craving for permanent silence and you hear a sound, it'll cause your mind to be annoyed or frustrated. It's the mind itself that's causing this because it's craving permanence. But you live in an impermanent world. You're not going to be able to be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. It's impossible. So if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, that things are constantly changing in the world, then you'll understand when you hear that sound, whatever it is, that it's going to arise, it's going to change, and it's going to fade away. And you can be at peace, understanding the world's working exactly the way it was intended to work. Then after that period of time of quietness, I'm going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start today's topic, helping you guys to understand chapter 18 from our book. In terms of your body position for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking. You would learn these different positions at different times as part of your journey to enlightenment. It's kind of like having a tool belt, and you use the different tools that you need at different times. So we have various classes, courses, and retreats that will help you to learn these. But today I'll just give you guys a little bit of guidance on the seated position to maybe help you find something that's more comfortable than what you already have. You can sit however you like, whether it's on the floor, in a chair. Some people like to maybe sit on a bench or a sofa or in a wheelchair. You can sit however you like. There's not just one way to sit, because that would be permanence, and we live in an impermanent world. So what I'm going to share with you are recommendations or suggestions that you could use if you like, but also you could come up with something on your own, because what's important is that the body's comfortable, not painful and not luxurious, but that it's comfortable, because then you can actually train the mind. So if you're on the floor, you might consider having some cushions under your rear. This will help soften your seat. And if you're going to bring your legs together in the cross-leg position, you might just choose to do that lightly. Whereas if they're real tight, this can impede the circulation and cause pain in the lower body. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets your hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, allowing the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here as well. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you could put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of anybody who might be sitting in a chair or a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair, you can also sit however you like. Some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly crossed at the ankles, but you can see me sitting here in a chair with my legs crossed, so this is an option too. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of your upper body, it's helpful if this is erect. With the sternum up and the shoulders back, it'll help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. What meditation is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation so that you can actively train it. Whereas if you were slouched like this, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you're real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be in the middle with the sternum up and the shoulders back, because not only will it help you to keep your mind attentive and alert during the meditation, but it'll make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to do some chanting here. You're welcome to join in, and then I'll come back in with the guidance afterwards. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang namasami Supatipano emakawato Savaka Sankho Sanghang namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Iti piso emahagawa arahang sama sambuddho vicacaranang samuno sagato rokawitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here, you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธเอมะเกวาโพตังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตเอมะเกวตาตัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนเอมะเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสเอมะเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone online as well. This individual who we refer to as the Buddha figured out over 2,500 years ago how to get to enlightenment. What enlightenment is, where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will no longer experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of that is eliminated from the mind through training the mind. There are certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind that you're training your mind to uproot those pollutions out of the mind. And as you do, you'll see your mind will experience more and more of these qualities of the enlightened mental state. You'll notice that your mind's focused, yet you have concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming, because in the unenlightened state, you'll have a certain amount of bitterness, harshness, and hostility in your mind, and that's going to come out in your relationships. And you'll tend to blame that stuff on other people, where in reality it's coming from your own mind. And when you're no longer doing that, you'll see your relationships will really blossom, they'll really improve. You'll notice that you can't even be in a bad mood anymore by the time you get to enlightenment, that it's physically impossible to be in a bad mood. So the Buddha taught how to train your mind to be able to accomplish this mental state. This isn't based in belief. He doesn't have rules and commandments. It's none of those kinds of stuff. He doesn't have rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, prayer, and all these kinds of things. If you're seeing those kinds of things associated with his teachings, those aren't his actual teachings. Instead, he's helping you to be able to understand your mind and do this inner work, this inner growth, this inner development. The mind in the unenlightened state doesn't truly understand how the world functions. This is why the mind struggles and has difficulties. The stress and the anxiety and the frustration is from the mind's lack of wisdom of how the world truly functions. And because of that, an individual will struggle and have difficulties. But when we talk about awakening, awakening to enlightenment or to be awake. This means to cultivate wisdom about the natural laws and how the world truly functions and how your mind functions, so that now you can work with your mind skillfully and actually train it to get to the point where the mind's enlightened. So the Buddha has a whole host of teachings that are guiding you to the elimination of discontentedness. He's helping you understand the way the world is. And one of the things that the Buddha teaches is about this being of God. Oftentimes people think that the Buddha never taught this topic. They'll say that the Buddha rejected God, or he denied the existence of God, or things like this. But he actually didn't. He actually taught about this being. For anybody who says the Buddha denied the existence of God, or rejected God, or didn't teach about this topic, they haven't penetrated into the teachings of the Buddha close enough to be able to see that he actually taught about this being. At that time during his life, they had actually belief in multiple gods. So he taught the people to understand about these gods that they were talking about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you to understand this topic of how you can get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being, if you'd like. But I'm also going to teach you how to get to enlightenment without a relationship with this being, because it's up to you to decide whether or not you'd like to get to enlightenment either with or without a relationship with this being. It's kind of like your neighbor. Like, you could have a relationship with your neighbor, and it's kind of nice to have a relationship with your neighbor, because if you need to borrow some salt or sugar, you can just go over to your neighbor and be like, hey, do you mind if I borrow some salt or sugar? Or if you go on vacation or holiday and you'd like someone to look over your house, you've got a friend that can look over your house. So it's kind of nice to have a relationship with your neighbor, but you could choose not to have a relationship with your neighbor and you'd get along just fine as well. So it's the same thing here, that it's not God who determines whether or not you get to enlightenment or not. So you can actually choose to have a relationship with this being or not. But if you're going to choose to either have a relationship with this being or not, there's certain things that you're going to need to understand in order to be able to accomplish that. So I'm going to help you to be able to understand that. So I'm going to be teaching and helping you to understand this topic, and I'm going to be pausing it a few times to be able to allow you guys to ask questions, because what you're going to need to do is be able to seek clarification on any topic that you're learning about the teachings of the Buddha. You're never interested in believing the books. You're not interested in believing me. You're not interested in believing anything that anybody teaches. Instead, you need to learn, examine, and investigate teachings. You need to reflect on them to verify if they're true or they're false. And then you need to practice teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life. And as part of that, you're going to need to ask questions. So when I pause, if you have a question, you're more than welcome to ask questions, whether you're here at the temple or you're online. If you're here at the temple, we have microphones in the white bowl there in the middle of the room. There's also some up here as well. So if you would like to ask a question, if you could just get a microphone, that'll be helpful so that the people online can hear you. If you just press the gray button and you'll see the lights come on, you hold this up to your chin and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple and they'll be able to hear you online. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then you can keep these with you, because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone with them. And if you're not using it, if you could turn it off, that'll be helpful so we don't get feedback through the speakers. And then for anybody who's in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions by putting that into the comment section and I'll be able to see that. Or you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. So to help us get started with this topic, what I'm going to do is just share some definitions of how I think about this being of God. Whether you actually choose to think about this being in this way or not is a choice for you to make. But what I'm going to do is help you to understand how I think about this being, so that when I say the word God, you'll understand what it is that I'm referring to. So this being of God, a common definition, is the creator of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being. Some people refer to this being as God or Allah, the all-knowing or all-powerful. And this being has omniscience and omnipotent, meaning it can understand everything that's happened from the beginning of time all the way to the end of time. So again, whether you think about this being in this way or not, it's a choice for you to make. But this is the way that I think about this being. And when I say the word God, this is what I'm referring to. Now, as I speak about this being, you might hear me use the pronoun of he every once in a while, because any kind of interaction that I've had with this being, I've always viewed this being as being a male. And the Buddha taught the same thing. He taught that this being is actually a male. Again, whether you think of it that way or not, it's a choice for you to make, but you just might hear me say the pronoun he every once in a while, and you'll know that that's the reason why, is because all my interactions with this being, it seemed like it's a male being. But some people think of this being as being a female, or some people think of this being as not having a gender at all. And you can think of it that way. It's up to you, however you would like to think about this being. But might use this word or this pronoun of he every once in a while. So once I share this definition, sometimes people ask, what is moral authority or this moral conduct? What moral conduct is there's certain moral behavior or virtuous behavior that we all participate in. As we make certain decisions about how we interact with people, it's going to produce a certain result for us. And when we make wise decisions about how we maybe speak to people or how we act around people or maybe our livelihood, we're going to experience certain results. If we're bitter, harsh, and hostile, for example, through our intentions, speech, and actions, then we're going to experience bitterness, harshness, and hostility coming back to us. But if we're loving and kind and warm and gentle, we can experience that coming back from us. But oftentimes in the unenlightened state, we don't understand what is the wise way to interact with individuals. We do what we think is best, but oftentimes it doesn't work because we're not practicing the true natural laws the way that the Buddha taught them. The Buddha taught certain natural laws that help you to be able to see the cause and effect relationship between how you choose to function in the world through your intention, speech, and actions and what you'll experience coming back to you. So part of the path to enlightenment is you're cultivating wisdom about moral conduct. He's not giving you rules or commandments to follow or anything like that. He's actually teaching you this natural law of cause and effect. I refer to this as the natural law of karma because in the original teachings of the Buddha, it's in the Pali language, and they use this word karma because of the Pali language. You might be more familiar with the word karma. This comes from the Sanskrit version of this word. Well, this natural law of karma, what it is cause and effect or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. Whenever you make decisions wisely, you will experience wholesome karma or wholesome results. And when you make decisions unwisely, you will experience unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. So it's nothing mystical or magical. It's not about punishments and rewards. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. There's no being who's overseeing this or any entity that's overseeing this kind of dishing out punishments and rewards for people. It's literally just the results of your decisions. It's like a sequence of events that whenever you make a certain choice or a certain decision, you're going to experience a result coming back to you. So the Buddha teaches you as part of his teachings about this natural law of karma. That's the main natural law that he's teaching you to awaken to or cultivate wisdom about. Because when you lack wisdom of a natural law, you'll tend to make unwise decisions and you'll experience unwholesome results. That's why when we were a child, we didn't understand the natural law of gravity. So we struggled and we had difficulties. We fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows, we broke our toys, and we cried and cried and cried because we didn't understand the world that we lived in. But slowly but surely we gained wisdom, or you might say we awoke to this natural law of gravity, and that's why we can navigate the world more peacefully. We tie our shoes a bit tighter. We look at the surface of the sidewalk as we're walking down the street. We stopped being so giddy and bouncing around like a kid all the time, and therefore we have improved results. We have wholesome karma as it relates to this natural law of gravity because we're making wiser and wiser choices. This is why we can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world because you might say we're fully awake to the natural law of gravity and we don't struggle with it anymore. In fact, if we fall down now, we might even start laughing. Whereas a kid, we cried and we were upset because we didn't understand the world around us. So there's other natural laws that are affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. So the Buddha didn't teach you the way the world should be, and that if everybody follows rules and commandments, the world's going to become a better place. He didn't do that. He's teaching you the way the world is, because by understanding the way the world is, now you can awaken to that wisdom and you can navigate the world more peacefully with the natural law of gravity. So we didn't believe in the natural law of gravity. We can see it for ourselves. We can see the truth that it's right there. So these other natural laws that the Buddha taught, you can't believe in them because belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody convinced you to believe it or you convinced yourself to believe it. So you need to be able to awaken or cultivate wisdom about these natural laws so you can see the truth and now make wiser and wiser decisions that is producing more and more wholesome results for you. And this is one of the reasons why your mind becomes so calm and so peaceful is because you understand the world that you live in. Instead of looking at the news or hearing about your friends and family, and you're just like, I don't understand why they keep doing that. by the time you get to enlightenment, you will understand what is happening in the world and why it's happening. And this being of God is one of the topics that the Buddha taught about, because this being does exist, and you may or may not have had the ability to independently verify that right now. So this being God does not grant enlightenment. It's a practitioner's decisions themselves through their own wise decisions of training their mind that's going to produce enlightenment. This being doesn't control us. We all have free will. Sometimes people are taught that this being has a plan for you, that there's some predetermined life and you need to worship this being. And this being is controlling what you experience. In fact, sometimes when people die, they think that it's God that chose to kill this person. And now this being has taken their person who's close to them away from them. Maybe they're angry or mad at this being because they think that they're the reasons why their mom or dad or grandma or grandpa has died. There's all these things that people attribute to this being, which isn't actually true. We have free will to be able to make any decision that we would like to make, but we will experience the consequences of those decisions. But when we don't understand the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, we will tend to look for other things to blame the results that we experience. So in the unenlightened state, when you're making unwise decisions, you are going to experience unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. And what people will tend to do is they'll blame that on good luck or bad luck, or destiny or fate, or this being of God or some entity called the universe, or you might blame it on other people. And as long as the mind's doing this, you can't actually get to a point where you're completely peaceful and joyful, because everything's out of your hands. The mind has essentially relegated itself to think that, I can't do anything to improve my life because what I'm experiencing is good luck or bad luck, or it's destiny or fate. Everything's predetermined for me, or that it's this being of God or some entity called the universe that is controlling what I experience, or it's other people that are controlling that. And if you relegate yourself to that type of thinking, then that means you're stuck, because you can't change any of those kinds of things. But when you understand that you have free will and this being doesn't control you, now it's a matter of cultivating wisdom to understand the world around you. And now you can make wiser and wiser decisions, and you can experience more and more improved results in your life. Because if you don't like any particular thing that's happening in your life, and you would rather that thing not happen any longer, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But if it's any of these other things, like good luck, bad luck, destiny or fate, or God or some entity called the universe, or maybe it's other people that you might think are causing you to experience any particular thing, then you're stuck. But the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that you are empowered to be able to make decisions for yourself, and that's going to produce more and more wholesome results in your life. So this is the teachings of the Buddha as it relates to this being of God, some to just help you get started, is that the Buddha never denied the existence of God, but instead he taught people how to attain enlightenment with an understanding of this being. But remember, you don't have to have a relationship with this being, but it's helpful to have an understanding of this being, but you don't actually have to have a relationship in order to be able to get to enlightenment. The Buddha discusses various gods in his teachings because people have belief in multiple gods during his life, so he needed to be able to help people to understand that. His objective wasn't to prove or disprove God's existence. Instead, the Buddha's goal was to help you understand the path to training your mind and getting to the point where it's free of anger, sadness, frustration, and all those other discontent feelings. His ultimate goal is for you to be able to get to enlightenment. He had already figured out how to get to the peace and joy himself, and he was just making himself available for the rest of his life for other people to understand how to get to that ideal life. He got to enlightenment at the age of 35, and then he taught until the age of 80, helping people understand this better way of life of how to train the mind to get to enlightenment. So through independent verification of the truth, you can acquire wisdom and get to the point where the mind is free of all these discontent feelings. So the Buddha focused practitioners' mind on liberation, on enlightenment, based on what's called right view and the natural law of karma, which we're going to talk more about here. But the Buddha's teachings aren't based in God's creative actions and, God controlling, everything that you experience, because that's not really truly the way that the world actually works. But some people think that way. So I'm going to help you to be able to see this through what I'm going to share with you in a way that you can independently verify that this being actually doesn't control you. So here's a teaching from the Buddha about this being of God. This is just one. So if people tell you that the Buddha didn't teach about this being of God, you can actually see in his own words right here where he's actually teaching about this particular being. But he taught other things as well. This is just one of many teachings. This one is titled, All is Caused by God's Creative Action. So the Buddha here is speaking. He says, then monks, I approach those ascetics and Brahmins. These are people who are on the path to enlightenment, and Brahmins are Hindu priests. These were different people that were, kind of seeking enlightenment and seeking a better life during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he approached these other people, these ascetics and Brahmin, who hold such a doctrine in view as this. Whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by God's creative activity. And I said to them, is it true that you venerable ones hold such a doctrine in view? Right? So he's going to these other people and he's saying, hey, is it really true that you guys think that everything that you experience, whether it's pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, is caused by God? And he says, when I asked them this, they affirm it. Meaning they said, yeah, that's exactly what we think. God is the one who controls everything and what we experience. Then I say to them, in such a case, is it due to God's creative activity that you might destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehoods, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you might be full of longing, have a mind of ill will, and hold wrong view. So these are part of the teachings of the Buddha. He teaches that it's unwise to kill other beings, because whenever you kill a being, you're causing harm to that being, and harm is going to come back to you. He also teaches not to steal, because when you steal, it's causing harm to someone. It's taking away their material possession. And now, like if I stole someone's car, they wouldn't be able to go to work. They wouldn't be able to go to the store and buy the things that they need in order to sustain their life. They wouldn't be able to take their children to school and things like that. So I've harmed this person, and now harm is going to come back to me. He also teaches about sexual activity, but these types of people, ascetics and Brahmins, they're usually not having sex at all. So that's why he says, are you indulging in sexual activity? And it's God that the one is controlling that. Or speak falsehoods. This is lying. The Buddha teaches that it's unwise to lie, because as you lie, people will discover those lies. They will see that you're untrustworthy, you're undependable, unreliable, and it'll cause difficulties in your personal and professional relationships. And then oftentimes people will have argumentative speech where they're arguing with each other and fiercely trying to convince somebody of one thing or another, where this just leads to broken relationships and difficulties. Harsh speech is your tone, your tempo, and your word choice and the way you speak to people. This is all coming from your own mind. It's not coming from other people. And idle chatter, this is like unpurposeful, unbeneficial speech. If you've ever been this kind of person, or if you ever know this kind of person, it's kind of like yada, 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 yada. And you're like, oh my gosh, when is this person going to be quiet? Like, I thought this was a conversation. They're broadcasting to me. Right? That's really what's happening, is it's a broadcast, right? So if you did that, people would find you to be uninfluential, and people would just stop listening to you, because it's so much work to just listen to this person. So the Buddha teaches that it's unwise to do those kinds of things. And then when he talks about full of longing, this is what we call craving, desire, attachment, where the mind longs and yearns, chases after the objects of its affection, thinking the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. And this is actually the underlying cause of your discontent feelings. And then ill will is the bitterness and hostility towards others that produces unwholesome results for you. And wrong view is where you don't understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. When people are in the unenlightened state, because of their lack of wisdom, they will firmly believe that it's other people who are causing them to be discontent. In fact, you might think that way right now. If you haven't learned the first and beginning teaching of the Buddha, which is the Four Noble Truths, and penetrated into it, you might firmly believe that it's your mom and dad that are making you angry, or your brothers and sisters, or your life partner, or your children, where in reality you can see in a way that you can independently verify that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And again, this is very empowering, because once you understand that and you can see the truth in it through your own independent verification, then you can apply the tools and the techniques to fix it, and you can transform your mind. But if you have wrong view, you'll blame other people for the feelings that you experience and you'll never fix it. What you'll tend to do is you'll tend to push people away, or you'll push a situation away. This is called aversion, where you might have pushed away friends or family, or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile to people through your intentions, speech, and actions. And this damages your relationships. Or you might start putting your expectations on people and trying to pressure them to do things your way. So when there's wrong view in the mind's trying to get its cravings fulfilled. It's trying to get everybody to do things my way. Because the unenlightened mind has an ego in there thinking that my way is the right way and everybody else's way is the wrong way. And the mind's craving permanence. It wants everybody to do it this way. And you can only be happy if people do it this way. So when people don't do it your way, your mind gets angry and frustrated. So that's why it's trying to create this little bubble where when someone does things opposite of the way that you would like them to do it or you want them to do it, the mind gets angry and it thinks the way to solve it is to push this person away so you can maintain this bubble of people doing things your way. Or you might be bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, trying to fear them into doing things your way. Or you might put your expectations on people and try to pressure them to do things your way. And people might be doing this to you too, where they're pushing you away and they're being bitter, harsh, and hostile to you, and they're putting expectations on you, trying to pressure you. So the Buddha is saying, is it God that's causing all of this stuff, right? He's kind of helping them to understand that it's not God. So he goes on here. He says, those who fall back on God's creative activity as the essential truth have no interest to do what should be done and to avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. Since they do not apprehend as true and valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded. They do not guard themselves, and even the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. So here, in this particular sentence, he's saying those who think that God is the one who controls everything that is being experienced in the world, they have no interest in improving their life and making wiser decisions because they're blaming everything they experience on God. And then he says, since they don't apprehend true and valid as anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded, meaning that their mind is lacking concentration. Because if you think this way, your mind doesn't understand true reality, and there's these certain pollutions that are in the mind, and now your mind's going to lack concentration or focus or clarity. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind will be crisp. It'll be very clear and sharp because you've improve the condition of your mind through uprooting the pollutions of the mind. So your mind's going to be performing optimally. So you won't be muddle-minded. But if your mind isn't enlightened, your mind will be muddled where you'll have a lack of focus, concentration, clarity, and memory. And then he says, they do not guard themselves, because one of the things the Buddha teaches is to practice mindfulness or awareness of mind, where you're guarding your mind, that when you're noticing anger and frustration arising, that you can eliminate it out of the mind. And if you do this enough, you'll get to the point where anger and frustration and all those other feelings never arise. But if you're not guarding your mind with mindfulness or awareness of mind, you can't ever get to that. So that's why he's saying that these people aren't guarding their minds. And then he says, even the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. If you were an ascetic during the lifetime of the Buddha, you were on the path to enlightenment, attempting to make your way to enlightenment. But if you think that God is the one who's controlling everything, then the Buddha is saying you're not even on the path to enlightenment, right? Because in order to be on the path to enlightenment, you need to recognize that it's you that needs to do this work to train your mind and make better and better decisions. But if you think that it's God that's controlling what you experience, then you haven't even understood that you need to do this work on your own mind in order to be able to improve and become a better and better person. So that's what he's saying here. So this is just one teaching where the Buddha is helping you to be able to see you have free will, that it's your choices that lead to any particular result that you experience. And you can see he's teaching about this being of God. He has other teachings about these types of topics that you normally are exposed to in environments where people are talking about God. And he calls these his undeclared teachings. So I'll just kind of go through these with you so you understand what the Buddha taught about these particular things. It's a different discourse. I don't have his words here. They're in the book. If you'd like to get a version of the book, it's free. You can download it for free. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon. So I have the discourse where this comes from inside the book series. But nonetheless, the Buddha gets to this point in time in his teachings where he says, remember what I taught. He said, I taught this. And he points to the elimination of discontentedness. And he says, remember what I didn't teach. I didn't teach this. And he goes through these 10 things that he didn't teach. And these are things that you oftentimes hear in an environment where they're teaching about God. He didn't teach whether the world is eternal or whether the world is not eternal. He didn't teach that. He didn't teach whether the world is finite or infinite. He didn't teach whether the soul is the same thing as the body or the soul is one thing and the body is another. In fact, he didn't even teach whether there is a soul or there isn't a soul. He left that as an undeclared teaching. His teachings aren't based on a soul because it conflicts with his teachings on the universal truth of impermanence and the universal truth of non-self. So he didn't even teach whether there is a soul or there isn't a soul. A Tathagata is an actual Buddha. This word means the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who discerns the truth, or the one who shares the truth. So what he's saying, as a Buddha is an enlightened being, he says after death, he's not going to declare whether he exists or whether he does not exist, or whether or not he both exists and does not exist, or neither exists nor does not exist. So he leaves it as an undeclared teaching of what happens for an enlightened being after enlightenment, right? So if you don't get to enlightenment in this life, then we know that an individual is going to be reborn back into the world. But if you get to enlightenment and die, he doesn't say what comes next, because his teachings aren't about an afterlife. It's not about believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. It's about learning, growing, and developing in this life, getting to a wonderful life now. And if you get to enlightenment in this life, your mind's so peaceful and so joyful, you're enjoying life so much, you're not going to care whether there's something next or not. So if you are longing, yearning for what comes next after this, you can't ever get to enlightenment because you're not content and peaceful in the present moment. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be peaceful and joyful in the present moment. Your mind's not longing, yearning for what's next. So the Buddha wisely didn't teach what may or may not come next after enlightenment, because his teachings are based on helping you get to peace and joy now in this life. So Gotama Buddha was a Tathagata. So when he talks about this, he's essentially referring to himself, who was an enlightened being, but not all enlightened beings are a Tathagata. Okay, so these are all his undeclared teachings. So there's some things here that I'm going to teach you about this being of God. But before I do, I would like to pause here. I haven't gone into the details of what I'm going to teach you about how to get to enlightenment with a relationship with God or without a relationship with God. This is just kind of prepping you to be able to see some of the things that the Buddha taught and what he didn't teach before we go into that topic. So is there anybody here who has questions on anything I've been sharing so far, or anybody online? Remember, we have the microphones. And for those of you guys online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions you like. So anything you guys would like to ask? Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. Okay, so now let me help you to be able to understand how to get to enlightenment with the relationship with this being, and then I'll help you to get to enlightenment without a relationship with this being, if that's what you're interested in doing. So a relationship with God isn't required to attain enlightenment, but it also won't hinder you if you choose to have a relationship with this being. But there are certain things that you might have learned in the past about this being that will hinder you if your mind continue to hold on to that type of thinking. So I'm going to help you to understand how you might need to modify the way you currently think. And you're going to need to be able to independently verify these things, because you're not interested in believing me and you're not interested in believing anybody else. So if you're interested in getting to enlightenment with the relationship with this being, you're going to need to practice what's called right view. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha, where you understand the Four Noble Truths. In four simple statements, you need to understand the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is something that I teach in all the foundational programs that I teach. And in this program, I taught it multiple times throughout the program. So what right view helps you to be able to understand is that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings because of craving, desire, attachment, that it's the mind longing, yearning, and craving
craving permanence. You need to be able to penetrate into this and see the truth for yourself, that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, that it's not this being of God that is controlling what you experience. You need to be able to accept responsibility for the things that are happening in your own life. Because oftentimes what we do in the unenlightened state with a lack of wisdom is we blame other people for the things that we experience. Because again, the mind in the unenlightened state has ego. The mind's ego thinks that I'm above everybody, or sometimes the ego will put yourself below people, and the mind will think I'm right and everybody else is wrong. And it's unwilling to look at its own self to be able to see the unwise decisions that you're making that's leading to any particular result that you're experiencing. Again, it's not about blame or fault. That's not what the Buddha is teaching you. He's just helping you to see true reality of why you're experiencing what you're experiencing, so that way you can cultivate wisdom, make better decisions, and then you'll experience better results and improve results. So you're going to need to understand and practice right view, where instead of looking externally for the source of your problem, and maybe even God being part of that, that you start looking internally. You start having this introspection, this inward looking eye, where you're looking inward to be able to see what it is that's causing your own anger and frustration. So for example, if you're checking in at an airport and you think your plane's leaving in about an hour, and you step up to the ticket counter and they're like, "I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry, ma'am. You can't actually check in your luggage yet. Your plane's not leaving for 3 hours." Right? And you start noticing this anger and frustration coming up. It's not the airline company that's causing that. And it's not anything else. What's causing that anger and frustration is your mind's craving. The mind's longing, yearning. I really want to get to Thailand and eat that mango and sticky rice. I want to get those massages. I need to play with those elephants. What do you mean I have to wait 3 hours, right? The mind is craving permanence. It wants every single airplane to take off on time. But it's not possible for every airplane to take off on time because the world is full of impermanence. You're going to meet with a weather issue, a maintenance issue, a crew issue. If you fly enough, it's only a matter of time before you get to a delay because of impermanence. But if you crave permanence, when you're standing there, you'll get angry, you'll get frustrated, and the mind will tend to become unskillful. So you would like to be able to start looking inward to practice right view, to be able to see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Every time you've ever been angry, your entire life, it's been your own mind. And I know that might be hard for you to be able to see, but you need to be able to peer into it more and more, because as long as you keep thinking it's other people, you won't ever be able to fix this and get to a point where your mind's completely peaceful and joyful. This doesn't mean that the other person wasn't doing something unwise, because they truly could have been doing something unwise, but it's the mind's craving for permanence, wanting everybody to do it this way, and that the mind can only be happy when people are doing it that way, where in reality you live in an impermanent world and people are going to do things differently throughout the world. So you need to practice right view, understanding it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. You're going to need to eliminate any craving in the mind where there's maybe a craving or desire or attachment to obtain things from God through prayer. Oftentimes people treat this being of God like a genie in a bottle. People might sit down and think they can pray their way to a better life. It's not possible. Anything that you experience in life is coming from decisions that you make. You can't pray in order to be able to improve your life and make certain things happen. People think that they might be able to just manifest something to occur. But everything that has occurred in your life is occurring from your decisions. If you need help to be able to see that, I will help you. Ask yourself these questions. Who chose where you're sitting right now? Who chose the clothing that you're wearing? Who chose the hairstyle that you have? Who chose whether or not you ate breakfast this morning? Who chose where you live? Who chose your job or occupation? Who chose the friends that you spend time with? So we could go on and on and on, and you can see that these are all decisions that you're making. Again, it's not about blame or fault or anything like that. It's about just seeing true reality that there are certain decisions that you're making that are leading to results. It's not God that's determining what you experience. So you can't pray your way to a better job. You can't pray your way to a nicer house. You can't pray your way towards having a boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife or a nice family. It's not possible. If you're going to experience better results in your life, you're going to need to cultivate wisdom, make better decisions, and you'll experience improved results in your life. But oftentimes people think that they can pray their way to a better life. So we can test this out. right? We can do it right now, right? Let's just say I'm interested in feeding disadvantaged people here in Thailand. I'd like to get some money in order to be able to feed these people. Well, let me pray. Dear God, give me $5 million right now so that I can feed the people here in Thailand and give them food. Please, 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 please. I don't see it anywhere. Do you? I don't see the $5 million anywhere. If I'd like to have $5 million to go feed people that need food, I'm going to need to acquire those resources through my own decisions, right? I can't do that through prayer, right? So the Buddha teaches this as part of his teachings. He says, if you could obtain the things that you wished for and aspired for through prayer, then who among us would lack for anything, right? If it was as easy as praying to be able to obtain the things that we want in life, then who among us would lack for anything? We'd have everything that we want and everything we need. But that's not the case, because everything that we experience and anything that we acquire is coming from our own decisions. Whether it's those clothes that you have, whether it's the jewelry that you're wearing, whether it's any kind of resources that you have, it all came from decisions that you made. It's not other people that are giving you what you are experiencing, whether it's food, clothing, shelter, medical care. You're acquiring those things through your own decisions, not through prayer. But sometimes people think that it's God that is giving you these things, so they might treat God like a genie in a bottle. I can't imagine being God, but if I was God and all day long people are like, give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that. I want this, give me that, give me that. Well, think about if you had like a friend that was calling you up, and every single time they called you, they were asking you for something. How long would it take before you stopped answering the phone, right? Probably on the second, third, fourth call where they kept asking you for stuff. Give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that. You'd probably stop answering the phone, right? So I can't imagine this being just constantly being bombarded with people just constantly asking them for things. So this being isn't a genie in a bottle. They don't magically make things happen in the world. They're not controlling what we experience. Sometimes people think, well, if this being is all knowing and all powerful and so loving and kind, why do we have murders? Why do we have rapes and child poverty and things like this? Well, this being isn't controlling what we experience on a day-to-day basis. We have free will. It's our own decisions that are leading to what we experience. So if somebody would like to pray to God, I would encourage you to eliminate the longing, yearning, and the begging God for things. Sometimes people might say that they believe in God, right? If they have a belief, some people know with 100% certainty that this being exists. I'm one of those people. I know that this being exists because I've had interaction with this being. I don't believe in this being. I know that this being exists. So for some people, they might believe in this being. They might pray and they say, hey, I believe in you. Or you might say, I know you exist, right? And then you might say, hey, I'm open to your guidance. If there's something you would like to help me with, I'm open to your guidance, because this being can actually help you with guidance in terms of wisdom to understand this world. And you might even just give thanks and appreciation towards this being. If you'd like to pray, that's a way that you could do that. You're going to need to eliminate any craving, desire, attachment to be with this being in heaven, because some people have been taught that's the ultimate goal, is to live this really wonderful life. And at the end of this life, this being's going to judge you, and you're either going to a good place or a bad place. This isn't actually true. This isn't the way this works. Let me ask you guys a question. You're probably not as powerful or as knowledgeable or wise as this being of God, but you at least have a certain amount of intelligence. Let me ask you, if you had a child and this child made a mistake, would you send them to a place to burn for eternity, for the rest of eternity, and burn in a place called hell for the rest of eternity? You're shaking your head no, right? You wouldn't do that, right? And you're wise. You're wise to a certain degree, right? But this being who people think about is even wiser and more powerful than them. But somehow they think that this being is sitting off somewhere in the sky, judging you, and he's either going to send you to a good place or a bad place at the end of your life. And if you make a certain mistake, you're going to burn in eternity for the rest of eternity. This isn't actually true. That's not what is actually currently happening. And you're also not going to this heavenly world to live permanently for the rest of eternity. these realms that people talk about, they're not actually permanent. We can look at the world around us and we can see that the world is impermanent. It's constantly changing. People are taught that the heavenly world is permanent, that you're going to die and you're going to go to heaven and you're going to be there for the rest of your life. This isn't actually true, or the rest of eternity. This isn't actually true, because we can see the world around us is impermanent. It's a universal truth. It's part of the natural laws that the world's constantly changing. So this realm of heaven is not permanent. So if there's any kind of attachment to God, any kind of longing, yearning towards this being, you're going to need to eliminate that in order to be able to have a relationship with this being. Some additional things is we need to understand that this being isn't controlling us, that what we experience is based in the natural law of karma. I've already been talking about that as part of this discussion that we're having. It's important not to have fear of this being, because sometimes people are taught to have fear of this being and that this being is controlling us and we should be fearful of this being. Think about if you were trying to have a relationship with like a life partner or even just a roommate or something like this, and you guys were living together. If you feared this person and every time they came home you were fearful, do you think you'd have a very healthy relationship with this person? Probably not, right? You'd be fearful every time they come home, and you'd be walking on eggshells when you're around them. You wouldn't really enjoy this relationship very well. In fact, you'd probably try to get out of that relationship as quick as possible because you're not interested in being in the kind of relationship where you're scared and fearful. So oftentimes people are taught to fear this being of God. But how could you ever have a healthy relationship with this being if you have fear towards this being? So you don't need to have fear because this being isn't causing any harm to you. Sometimes people are taught if you get in a car accident that it's this being that did that, or if you die it's this being that's doing that, or if people around you are dying it's this being that's doing that. So they'll have fear towards this being, but this being isn't controlling what we experience. It's our decisions that are leading to any particular result. So you can get rid of this fear and you'll actually experience improved results with a relationship with this being. So when I start talking about this, when I start sharing with people that you can't pray your way to a better life, that this being isn't controlling you, this being doesn't have a predetermined life for you, and you need to live this plan according to this being. You don't need to be fearful of this being. This being isn't a genie in a bottle. Sometimes people say, well, what's the purpose of this being? Like, why does this being even exist? Well, if you'd like to understand about this being of God, the way that I think about them is I think about this being as being a practitioner of these teachings, that this being understands these natural laws very clearly, that this being isn't attached to us, and they're also not possible to restrain us. Because sometimes people say, well, if this being is all-knowing and all-powerful, then why do we have rapes and murders and child poverty and all these kinds of things? If this being has love and kindness and compassion, wouldn't that being stop all of this stuff from occurring? Well, you need to be able to understand that this being isn't attached to us. This being is giving us free will to make whatever decisions that we like. If this being controlled what it is that we experience, none of us would like to live in that world. Because as we were growing up and our parents tried to control what we experience, we didn't like that. And we didn't enjoy that. So if this being controlled what we experience, we wouldn't actually enjoy that much at all. We wouldn't be interested in being part of this world. So the most loving and kind thing you can do is not put your expectations on other people and try to control people to do things your way. So this being is allowing us to make whatever decisions we like, and then we experience the results of those decisions. And I learned that it's important to allow beings to be able to cultivate wisdom, that if this being was truly restraining us every time that we attempted to do something that was unwise, we would never learn the wisdom of why that thing is unwise, and we would keep trying to do it over and over and over again. So this being would have to keep restraining us over and over and over again. So this being isn't going to restrain us from our unwise choices, because then we never learn the wisdom of how unwise that thing is. Instead, we have free will. We do what we do. We experience the consequences, and then we learn the wisdom of how unwise that thing is. I learned this with my own son, actually. I have a son. He's now almost 14 years old. He's 13 years old. When he was an infant, starting to crawl around and walk around, he used to kept trying to go over to the stove and touch the stove, and the stove was hot. And I would take him away. As I saw him going over to the stove, I would take him away and restrain him. And then after a couple of moments, he would try to go back over to the stove and touch the stove, and I would pull him back and I would restrain him and pull him back from the stove, never letting him get even close to the stove. And then he would try to go to the stove again, and I would pull him back and I would restrain him. Well, after doing this for a period of time, I eventually was like, you know what? I'm going to let this kid get close to the stove so he can understand why it is that I'm keep pulling him back. So he started walking over to the stove, and I was watching him, and he got over close to the stove and he was holding out his hand to touch it. And he didn't even get to the point where he touched the stove. He just felt the heat and he pulled his hand back. And he never tried to touch the stove ever again, because he cultivated the wisdom of how unwise it was to be able to touch the stove. Where when I was constantly restraining him and restraining him and restraining him, he never cultivated the needed wisdom to make better decisions. So if this being of God restrained us from our unwise choices, we would never actually cultivate the wisdom to make better choices. And now the world would just continue to be controlled by this particular being. But the most loving and kind thing you can do is let somebody make their own decisions and not try to control them and put expectations on them. So it's not this being who is causing the murders. It's not this being who's causing the rapes and the child poverty. It's our decisions that are producing those things. And now this being is allowing us to be able to cultivate the wisdom of how unwise that is. And the Buddha is helping you to be able to see how unwise these choices are so that we can make better and better choices as part of our own individual life. So this being isn't attached to us. This being's emotions and feelings aren't based on whether we have a good life or a bad life. This being understands that we are making the decisions that we make and we experience the results that we experience. And this being is allowing us to make whatever decisions we think is best. Then if you're interested in seeing all beings live in harmony, that's what this being of God is interested in too. But this being understands in order for all beings to live in harmony, we need to cultivate wisdom. It's impossible for us to live in harmony without cultivation of wisdom. You know, now you see people doing different things where they're just walking through society, where, you know, there's different groups that are organizing these peace walks where they're walking and just walking for peace. Well, you can't get to peace through just walking. If someone's going to get to peace, you need to practice the way of peacefulness. You need to train your mind and cultivate the wisdom of how to attain peace. You can't get to peacefulness through wishing for it or just aspiring for peacefulness. You need to train your mind and cultivate wisdom to be able to get to peace. So if the humanity is going to get to peace and harmony, we all need to cultivate wisdom individually and start interacting with people in wiser ways. And that's what the Buddha is teaching. And this being of God is interested in seeing that occur. And that's why we all need to cultivate wisdom. And this being's not going to control us. So this is how you would get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being, is to practice right view, to eliminate craving, longing, yearning for this being to control things that you're experiencing and being a genie in a bottle. You need to be able to understand the natural law of karma, that we experience what we experience based on decisions that we make, and to eliminate fear towards this being, because there doesn't need to be any fear, because this being isn't controlling us and isn't controlling what we experience. And then understand that this being isn't attached to us and it's not responsible to restrain us. It's our own decisions that are leading to any particular result. And while this being is interested in seeing us live in harmony, this being is wise enough to understand that we each need to cultivate wisdom in order to be able to do that. It's not this being that's going to snap their fingers and instantly create harmony for us. We need to create it ourselves. So this is how you would get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being, if somebody was interested in doing that. But I'm going to pause here and see if you have questions before I teach you how to get to enlightenment with no interest in a relationship with this being whatsoever. Yep. Go ahead, Graham. For those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
So I guess my question is around when things happen in your life, like you look back and like these, like, for lack of a better word, miracle would happen, like smaller percentage chance circumstance that kind of takes you on a path for the rest of your life that you really had no control over. And you kind of look back and you're like, wow, that was serendipitous, or you know what I mean? There's all these words to describe these things. Just trying to make sense, or even things that you want to do, you think you need to do, and then something happens to stop that from happening and puts you on another path. Like, I guess my question is just around like how do you explain this?
Yeah, people will say that these things are a miracle or that word that you use, serendipitous or whatever, but it's actually choices that you're making because you're coming to a certain fork in the road and you're making a choice to either go right or left. It's your choices that are leading to any particular result. It's not this being's choices. This being isn't performing in a miracle in order to convince you to do one thing or the other, because this being isn't attached to you. This being would like to see you be well and see you live in harmony, but this being understands that it's your choices that are going to lead to that, not this being's choices. So this being isn't, confronting you with a choice and then, forcing you to make a particular choice, but in your life, you're coming to certain choices and then you make those choices. And now you're continuing to make choices that are leading to whatever results that you experience. But it's not this being, it's not a miracle. It's not that other stuff that people use to be able to describe that. It's your individual choices. And the more that you see that, the more you can understand it. Okay. So yes, Martha.
And you said that this being can give you some guidance. Can you tell a bit more about that?
Yeah, so this being, if you're interested, can actually guide you and help you to cultivate wisdom. It doesn't do it when you want and how you want. Like if you were at a fork in a road and you were like, God, please tell me, should I go left or should I go right? This being's not going to tell you because you need to make your own decisions. But this being can provide you some guidance that it's almost, I think of it as like grandfatherly type guidance, where like in your day-to-day life, as you're doing things, you can almost hear this, kind of voice in your own mind, that it's almost like grandfatherly advice. And you know that it's wisdom that you've never encountered before in your life. It's not coming from you. It's not coming from anything else. It's coming from this being. And this being isn't trying to control you to do one thing or the other, but it's like this guidance about, certain ways to go forward in life. And now you can't believe that. You can't just follow it haphazardly. You still need to learn, reflect, and practice and make a wise choice. But this being can guide you about certain aspects of life. But it's never going to be when you want or when you expect. It's going to just be when this being knows that you need that guidance. But the only time this being would do that is if an individual is interested in that guidance. This being isn't going to force that guidance upon you, but that's the reason why someone might choose that if they decide that they let this being know that they're open to their guidance, that you might find that this being will start to guide you. Not every day, not every moment, not every second, but in certain situations, this being can provide you some insight. But then ultimately, it's your choice of whether or not you choose to follow that insight or not. And if you do follow it, you'll see that it actually works. And if you don't follow it, you'll see that you will have certain struggles and difficulties. But this being isn't going to punish you or reward you for either choosing to follow the advice or not. It's just that you will see, based on the natural laws, when you make a decision based in this wisdom, that it will produce wholesome results for you. And sometimes you might intentionally not do it the way that this being is actually guiding you. And that way you can see that this being isn't punishing you and you don't have to be fearful of this being. It's almost like grandfatherly advice. And you'll know that it's this being because typically what this being does when it's providing this guidance is you'll have this tingling across your shoulders, up the back of your neck and over your head, right? Some people call this warm fuzzies. There are those based on conditioned pleasant feelings, but then this being also, when you develop your ability to observe your mind, you can see that there's warm fuzzies that are associated with conditioned pleasant feelings arising, but then there's these particular feeling that this being kind of sends across your shoulders, up the back of your neck and over your head, that helps you to be able to see that it's this being that's providing you that guidance. And if you see that multiple times and you notice that guidance in your mind and you actually practice it, this is part of the way that you'll know that this being definitely exists. But whether you choose to have that type of relationship, it's a choice for you to make. You might not be interested in that type of relationship. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So now, really easy to be able to teach you how to get to enlightenment without a relationship with this being. If you have no interest in a relationship with this being whatsoever, that's fine. You can still get to enlightenment, because it's not this being that determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. But there's one thing that you're going to need to understand and be able to practice in relationship to that. Because oftentimes people have experienced different things in life. They might actually have anger and hatred and ill will towards this particular being. Like, for example, if you grew up in a certain environment as a child, and maybe you were sexually abused or physically abused by people that are supposedly operating on behalf of this being of God, you might think that this being hates you, or you hate this being, or you might think this being doesn't love you. But you need to be able to understand, if you experienced any of those kinds of things at any point in your life, it wasn't God that was causing you to experience those things. It was those beings, those people that chose to do those things, those unwise things. It wasn't this particular being. So if you have anger and hatred and ill will in your mind towards any being whatsoever, you won't be able to get to enlightenment. Even if there's an ex-boyfriend from 20 years ago, or an ex-girlfriend from 10 years ago, if you're angry and hateful and resentful towards that person, you still have anger and hatred in your mind, and it's not liberated. It's not free. So if you have anger and hatred towards this being of God, your mind's not free. So you're going to need to practice loving kindness towards all beings, including this being of God. If you have anger and hatred or resentment towards this being, your mind's not free. Sometimes people think that they can kind of keep this anger and hatred kind of in the corner of their mind towards one particular being, maybe like an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend. You're not going to be able to do that, because that anger and hatred is going to come out in other situations too. It's going to come out through your intentions, speech, and actions, and it's going to cause difficulties in your life. So the same thing is true about this being. If you try to keep this anger and hatred kind of in the corner of your mind and think that you're just going to love everybody else, but this one being you're going to have hatred towards, your mind still isn't free. Like, sometimes even just hearing the word God, some people get really angry and really frustrated. They're really hostile just hearing that word God, because of the things that they've been taught in the past and their experiences that they've had. This is called conditioning, that the mind is conditioned to think a certain way. And this is part of the pollution of the mind. And what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're unconditioning the mind. You're purifying the mind. You're being able to see true reality. So that's what I'm helping you to be able to see here, is get to a point where you have love and kindness for all beings. Whether you think this being exists or not, that's a choice for you to make. But no matter what, at least get to a point where you have nothing but love and kindness. You might be thinking, well, I don't know if that being exists or not. I'm not sure if I'm interested to have a relationship with that being or not. But if that being exists, hey, that's fine. I'll just have nothing but love and kindness towards that being. I'm not going to have any anger or hatred or ill will towards that being. And in that situation, you can make your way to enlightenment, right? Because now your mind isn't harboring any anger or hatred or ill will towards this being. And you need to be able to do this with all beings. Like I mentioned, even the ex-boyfriend, even the ex-girlfriend, you need to be able to release that anger and hatred out of your mind. Because sometimes what people do is they hold on to this anger and hatred. They think that this resentment that they're holding on to is like getting back at the other person. But the only thing that's happening here is it's damaging your own mind. It's causing harm to your own mind. It's kind of like if you hold on to this anger and resentment in your mind, thinking that you're getting back at the other person, it's kind of like holding on to a hot coal and trying to burn the other person. The only person getting burned is yourself. So if you hold on to anger and hatred towards this being, the only person who's getting burned is yourself. So you would like to liberate your mind of that. So there's ways to do this. The Buddha teaches loving kindness meditation, which I've taught in this program before, where you can train your mind to essentially rewire your mind to be loving and kind. And you can train your mind to eliminate this resentment and hostility if it's in there. In fact, today at 6:30 here, I'm going to be teaching loving kindness meditation. So at 6:30 p.m., it's synced up with the night walking market. If you're coming to the shopping market, you can come here at 6:30, and I'm going to teach you how to train your mind to have loving kindness, not just towards this being, but any being whatsoever. So if you have brothers and sisters or cousins or mom or dad or ex-boyfriends or girlfriends that you have anger and hatred towards, you you can free your mind of that. Sometimes people even have anger and hatred towards themselves. So sometimes there's this inner dialogue, this negative self-talk within your mind, and it's no fun to walk around with that. So there's a meditation to be able to help you to be able to uplift that and eliminate it out of the mind. And you can also do that with this being too, is get to the point where you don't have that anger and hatred. And if you're able to do that, you can get to enlightenment without a relationship with this being. Because like I said, you can have a wonderful life having a relationship with your neighbor, and you can have a wonderful life without a relationship with your neighbor. It's the same thing here. So it's a choice for you to make. And these are the two ways that you could actually accomplish getting to enlightenment, with or without a relationship with this being. But you're going to need other teachings besides what I'm sharing here, of course, in terms of getting to enlightenment. That's why this is chapter 18 in the book. All the other chapters are helping you understand the things that you need to be able to make your way to enlightenment. So if you haven't learned those other chapters, I suggest you start at the beginning of the book and gradually make your way through that. And then you can reach out to me as you need help, as I'm here to help you. So any questions on how to get to enlightenment without a relationship with God? No questions? Okay. I don't see any online either. So I'll just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn and understand the teachings of the Buddha. If you guys would like to learn more, you're more than welcome to do that. We have a bulletin board over there with options that you can see how to learn more. You can also check our website as well. And you can even come talk with me and I'll help you to be able to get plugged in to any kind of resources that you need to be able to make your way on the path to enlightenment. So have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day, whatever you choose to do. And perhaps I'll see you next time. Take care. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.